Okay, so now with painting all the little details, I've already painted these guys up here, little details on them. Do a quick pan over so you can see them. Not doing real in-depth details here, trying to keep it relatively simple. Cut down on the time since these are essentially kind of just your battle line chaff units. These are the ones I'm going to use to kind of show what I did. So this guy, nothing on him has been painted. He's still in the original just spray painted stage. So I'm going to use him as my model to show y'all how I painted the little details. And these are mostly painted. I just left a couple parts unpainted just so I can show how I did it. I think this guy, it's the feather. I've already base painted the feather white. It takes about 2 to 3 thin coats. You don't want to go too thick because you don't want to fill in the detail on the feather, but you do need to put a couple coats on there. That way it's bright white, as that pink will show through underneath, since I'm going to be using a contrast over it. So there's him. This one, I left this thing. I don't know if it's supposed to be a weapon or just like it's not focusing, or just I don't know, a symbol, a weapon, whatever it is. Left that unpainted, so I'll show how I'm going to paint that. And then if we can focus in, finally this guy. The thing that's been left unpainted on him are his horns. So I'll show you how I'm going to paint those. It's going to be similar once done to this guy's horns. I think I'm just going to be playing with it as I go. And again, I'm not doing super detailed stuff on these guys. Just because I want to do this all relatively quick, and I'll likely end up having to paint a lot more of these pink cores. So I don't want to do really intense paint jobs on them. These are all the little paints that I've used. It is still quite a bit of paint. You can do these a lot more simpler, less stages, less steps, and them still look good, but this is currently what I'm doing and what I'm using. All right, so let's go ahead and start painting these boys. All right, so I'm gonna be jumping between the different figures just to speed along the process a little bit, because I'm gonna have to let paints dry before I can go over them. So first, I'm just gonna open up this White Scar Air paint. And I'm gonna paint all of these flames on this. Sorry if I'm not holding it in a way that you can see it well, but all the flames on this staff. And it will require at least 2 coats of the white paint to really cover it. Well, maybe not. I don't know, we'll see, since it is zenithaled. I don't know, we'll see how it works. Now this is a very thin paint since it's an airbrush paint. I mean, obviously you can use just a normal base coat paint. It'd probably go on quicker and easier, require less coats if you did. But since I'm using, this is just what I have on me currently. So since I'm using this, it will naturally kind of flow into the crevices, just like a contrast paint would. So don't do too heavy an application to start, because then you're just gonna fill in your details. I'm sorry, I hope y'all can see this. I can't actually see the camera as I'm painting these because I've yet to get a proper rig for filming painting. I think that's about as good as it's gonna get until it dries and I can put another coat on. Just quick and dirty. All right, let that dry. Oh, you know what? He's got a little bit of flame here on his tail. I don't know if you can see it on here, but I'll go ahead and go over that real quick with some white, and you have to be really careful when painting out these little bits and pieces and details on these figures, because like that, you don't want to accidentally get it on his skin where you've airbrushed, because it's really hard to match that paint. Now I'm not doing a glow effect around the flames because I honestly really haven't played around with doing a glow effect. I think it would look really cool if you do a glow effect, but these will not have it. I apologize. Maybe down the road I will play with glow effects and come back and redo it, or on a next batch of pink horrors do it. I don't think I see, I think that's the only little bit of flame on this guy. And it will need a second coat as well. Okay, so I'm gonna put him aside, let that dry. He's just, I'm using putty to keep him on the base, and it's super unbalanced, so it falls over all the time. Okay, let's see, do I need the white for anything else? I do, actually. I use the white, picking this guy back up, and I'm gonna rinse my brush off. I use the white to fill in the eyes. It helps when you go, and then I paint over it with the Aethermatic blue contrast. It helps make it look like it's glowing a little bit. So just a little dab of white in there. And you still want to be careful, that way you don't get it on too much, but if you do get a little bit outside of the eye, wet your brush, try to clean it up if it's not dry yet. But worst case, if you can't get it up, it's okay. You'll just kind of add a little bit of a glow effect around the eye. So it's not that big of a deal. And then really you gotta be looking close to see it anyways. Okay. So colored his little eyes in with white, and I think that's it. I already painted the feather on this guy white. Let's see, what do we want to do as our next? Let's go ahead and grab, I'm using Screaming Skull. I think that any kind of pale off-white color, whether it's Screaming Skull, or if you're doing Citadel, you can do Wraithbone or whatever, just kind of off-white, yellowish white color for the nails, teeth, bones, stuff like that. I think it looks really good. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some here. Usually I use a wet palette, but right now I'm not. Okay, so we're gonna take our little dude back here, and I'm gonna use this Screaming Skull, this off-white, kind of yellowish white color, and I'm just going to paint all the little nails. And again, being careful that you don't accidentally get it on his skin. Hopefully y'all are able to see this. So yeah, I'm painting nails, the teeth. I guess he does kind of have a tooth here. He's got mostly beak, but I'm gonna say this is a tooth right here. See the tooth on this side, yep. And you may need to go back and do a second layer on these. It's up to you. If you're okay with how it looks, then fine. You're gonna end up covering it up with shade, which helps. Otherwise you can go back and do a second layer. I'm gonna also get these claws down here on the feet real quick. Okay, I think I got all of the pieces on him that needs to be off-white. And then this guy's horns. I'm gonna paint these off-white. And since this is a bigger surface, it's probably gonna need 2 coats. Just so it doesn't look too streaky. Okay, there he is. If I'm holding it properly for you to see, it's just 1 layer. I'll probably go back and put an additional layer on it after it dries, but his horns are painted in Screaming Skull. Okay, so next, let's go ahead and let's go ahead and paint the beak. So I'm using this Filthy Brown from Game Color, or Vallejo Game Color. It's really like a mustard yellow. I'm not doing anything super fancy with the beak. I'm not doing like, you know, a kind of a color shift or gradient or blending or anything like that. Just keeping it relatively simple. The effect we're going for is what I did with this guy here, which I'm happy with. I like it like that. So you can find some really fancy beak versions that people have painted up on YouTube and with their how-tos. All right, so I'm basically just going to coat this on. It only takes 1 coat just because the pink underneath it helps actually bring out the color and make it pop. Again, you're being careful not to get it on the skin, get up underneath the beak. Don't want to go too thick because there are some kind of carved in swirlies that you don't want to fill in that detail. And I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of effort trying to color the underside of this, because I don't really see people picking them up and staring closely on the inside of this mouth. Get this bottom part. Now it's kind of hard to determine where the beak starts on this bottom. There's not like a clear delineation here. So I'm just kind of making that line up. And I am going to have it be like a hard line. I'm not going to try to blend it into the pink or anything. I don't know. Part of me wonders if I should take it further in this way, but I think I'm okay with where it's at right there. All right, so we'll let that dry. And let's see, what do we want to work on next? I guess we can go ahead and real quick paint this little staff here. And I've kind of gone back and forth on what I want to paint the staff. And on the box and the Citadel paint, they have it painted black, and they made, you know, very bright red flames. And it looks more kind of Chaos Lord, honestly. It's all black, gold, red. But I want to stick with Zinchi colors, or what is in my head, at least my Zinch Army's Zinchi colors. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and go with this Night Lord's blue base. It may or may not look good. I don't know, but we're just gonna go with it. I didn't want to go with a bright neon color because I didn't really want to pull away from, I don't want just to throw up lots of bright colors all over this. It's already pretty bright itself. So I wanted to go with a dark color for this staff. And We'll see how it ends up turning out to look. Around the metal bits, you don't really have to paint too carefully around the metal bits, but once you get down to the hand here, you really don't want to get it on the fingers at all. Just be careful in the painting. And I may or may not need to do an additional coat. We'll just have to see how it looks when it dries. But I kind of like it. I think I like the color. So I'll go ahead and paint this up real quick and we'll see what it looks like when I'm done. Okay, so I went and I painted the staff. There you go. It's very dark blue. From far away, it could almost be black, but it's actually a blue, and I really like it. I think I like it more, definitely like it more than using a black. And I think it just pulls in the pink really well. So I did that, and I put an extra coat on it, and then I went back and put an extra coat on the off-white areas, the teeth and the nails and stuff. And put an extra coat on his horns. All right, so next we're gonna do the first step on our flames, okay? Now that the white's nice and dry, what we're gonna do, I'm gonna use this Aethermatic blue contrast paint. I love this color. It's really good at making blue glow effects, and then some contrast medium. Make sure, obviously, anytime you use any paint, you want to mix it up, but these contrast paints especially, because the pigment tends to settle really quick at the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to use, not a wet palette, but like this little thing is what I've been using. You can see I've done it here before. But essentially, I'm going to start with kind of, we'll say there's a good bit here. We're gonna do 2 drops of the contrast, the contrast medium into a little pot here. I'm gonna do one more. Well, when I say drips, since I'm actually just using my brush, so 3 little brushfuls of the contrast medium. And then I'm gonna do 1 brushful of the Aethermatic blue to start. Basically, I'm really diluting it down. And this is already a very diluted paint, so it doesn't usually need any dilution, and if you do, very little. But because I want to just do this very subtle glow up and leave a lot of the white behind in the areas where the flame connects with the staff, I want to start very, very light with this. Okay. Have my brush loaded up, and I'm just going to start painting it on. See, it's actually still pretty dark. If anything, I would maybe want to thin it out some more. But I'm gonna go ahead and paint it all the way down, all over it, nice and wet. And you may, because this stuff is runny, you probably need to hold it upside down for just a little bit as it starts drying, so it doesn't naturally, gravity doesn't run it into the places you don't want it to be. Now, real quick, while this is still wet up here on the big flame, I'm going to, I actually gotta set it down for a second, open up my medium again real quick and just dab my brush right into the medium. And I'm gonna start here bottom and further dilute this out a little bit. And if you need to, you can always go back in after the fact and do some very light highlights with the flat white at the bottom. And really, most of this is just me playing with it. I am still learning kind of how to do flames. I did watch a video or two, but really I'm just playing with it. until it looks something like something that I like. I don't know. Okay, so I'm just gonna let this dry before we add any more to it. If it's wet and you keep adding stuff to it, it's because it's so thin, it's just gonna flow and it's gonna gloop into the cracks, and it's just not gonna give the right effect for the flames. So I'm gonna let it dry as is, and then we'll go back and play with it some more. So this dealie here, I'm gonna paint this thing. And I'm actually gonna, normally I go with a very small amount of metallic paint on the very tip so that way I can control it. But since it's such a big surface, I'm just gonna go thick and start laying it on there. And it's nice, I wouldn't do this with the thicker metallic paints. If they're thicker in the pot, I wouldn't really do it this way, because then you're just gonna clump it in and obscure your details. But with these air metallics, I find you can do it better. Now they are thinner, so they very much show the color underneath them, or at least this one does. So you may find that you need to apply multiple coats. You gotta wait for it to dry, of course, in between coat applications. And I'm just gonna paint it all over with this gold. And this is another reason why metallic paints in general, because it's so thin, and at least these runnier ones, they show what's underneath them, unless you do multiple applications. But the more applications of metallic paint you do, the thicker and clumpier it can get. As a rule of thumb, a lot of people will generally give a good base coat of black before they start painting the metallic. And you may get a better result if you do that with these guys too. I'm just being lazy and skipping that step. And I'm okay with a bit of the pink glow underneath it. And I do tend to go in and give a little extra thin coat on top of the first coat. And then I'm going to be using a shade, so it does help fill in that pink underlayer. I'm gonna go ahead and finish this out real quick. Okay, there is the first little base coat on this, whatever this is in his hand. I know it says it in the war scroll. I just cannot recall off the top of my head. So there's his piece painted. Metallic. Let me move this guy away over here. Okay. And now we'll go ahead and paint all of these metallic bits except for the metallic pieces inside the flames. I'm going to finish the flames before I go back in and paint the metallic pieces there. But I will go ahead and just paint all of this real quick. And again, I'm covering the entire thing. Actually, I'm going to rinse my brush off first. I'm going to cover the entire thing, all the metallic areas, and this gold. Now see how painting this first layer on here, see how much more this gold pops over this kind of a dark gray paint here, as opposed to when I was painting it over the pink. It just kind of goes to show you how black is a better base paint for metallics. It really does help the metallic paints pop. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint all of these bits, including these little rings around the pole. You gotta be careful so that way you don't accidentally get it on the blue. And then I'll show you all what it looks like when I'm done. So there's a base coat on all the little metal bits. You get all this metal thing here, and you got these little knobbies there, and at the bottom, this little center thing here. It will definitely need a second coat. Once I'm done, once it's done drying, I'll apply a second coat off camera, and then you can see what it looks like once that's done. The next thing to paint are gonna be all these little things, these little filigree on the actual whore. He's got these little rings and bands and bracers and bracelets. And then of course this knife here that I will paint next. All right, so let's go ahead and start painting all of these little doodads. And again, make sure you have less paint on your brush, just a little bit on the tip, because you don't want it to bleed off onto the skin. And I'm just gonna start painting all of his little jewelry pieces here. This is a bracer, actually. Very ornate looking bracer. Excuse me. And these will all need a second coat as well, just so it pops a little better. Or if you're okay with it, you could just leave it as a one coat. We will be shading over it, which will, you know, cover up any of the pink or purple showing through underneath. And then we're gonna end up highlighting back over it anyways. So it's not as big of a deal if you don't feel like doing multiple coats. But I probably will be doing a little bit of touch-up secondary coats here and there. And the sword, it's not gonna all be gold, but I am just gonna base it all in gold for now. Just because it makes it easier, faster. Okay. It's a good enough general first base coat there on the sword. I'm gonna continue picking out the little bits and bubbles here. It's got this ring around this head tail. Try not to let it bleed too much onto his skin. If it does a little bit, that's okay, because the shade we are using, Reclin Fresh Flesh Shade, to go over this these metallic gold bits, blends in well with the skin color. So it will help kind of smooth it back out so it doesn't look like you just have, you know, metallic all over your guy's skin. Excuse me. Okay, he's got teeny little rings around this little tail. So I'm gonna try to just pick out the very top of them. They're so little, I don't think it's that big of a deal to paint thoroughly the whole ring, as long as it pops. And it looks like there's some weird little metal bits hanging off here. I think they're metal bits. I'm just gonna assume they're metal bits, so I'm gonna paint them. Whoops, that's a flame, not a, oh well. Oh, a toe, it's a toe, it's okay. I don't think it's gonna show up too much. Not a toe, a claw, that's the word. Nail, claw. Okay, let's see what else we got. Oh, we got this little bracelet thing here. It's kind of like a snake coiled around the wrist. With how like ugly these horrors are, I mean, they are demons. I think it is cool that they have like all these little shiny metallic jewelry baubles and bits. Pretty ornate. Just a fun little flavor thing, I guess, with the Zinch. The fuzz off of there. And I did get a little bit of metallic bleeding off onto his wrist, but once I add that shade in, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Sorry if I'm painting off camera. Let's see what else. Oh, he's got this big bracer right here. And it almost kind of looks like when you look at these bracers and things, it looks like they've been like formed out of the skin. Not that it's like an armor piece that they just put on. It's like it's a part of their body. That could just be the actual model, how it, you know, forms within the mold or whatever they use to make these things. But I like to think it grew out of the body. It's part of the body. Okay, let's see. I always try to pay close attention to the fingers, because a lot of these dudes have like little rings. Yep, see, here's a little ring. Granted, you don't have to pick these details out. You could just let it be, but I'm picking it out. All right, I think that's all of the little metal bits on this dude. So we're gonna let all of it dry, and I'll go back in off camera and do a second coat on everything. I won't make y'all sit through watching that. That's boring. In the meantime, let's go ahead and paint the tail that I forgot about, and then do our next coat on this flame, because the flame should be good and dry now. Go back to my non-metallic brush. Add it a little bit. Okay, so for the feathers, I'm using Arcillian green. So when I chose the paint scheme for this, obviously I tried to keep it relatively in line with the traditional Zinch paint scheme. I didn't want to go too crazy out, like just change up completely the paint scheme. Since, I mean, they're called pink horse, I kind of want them to be pink. And I also didn't want to just have a ton of different colors jumping out at you, and it becomes an eyesore. I feel like sometimes Zinch, I think the Zinch models are beautiful, and I love that they're all bright poppy colors, but I've looked at I've seen armies where it's just so many bright colors that it like starts giving you a headache after a while. So I'm trying not to just slam with a whole lot of really bright colors. Keep it relatively simple motif here. So hence why with this, you know, you got your pink model. I did a little bit of purple on there fading out, and then going with blue to play off the pink, also to kind of hint at the blue horrors in my head. So blue flame, blue, teal, whatever color you want to call this, feathers, though I did do, if you can see it, blue flame, blue feathers, a little bit of a green stem. I don't know if I like it or not, but that's what I painted. And for the most part, just keeping with these colors, and technically you have the yellow beak, but it's all essentially just the same colors. I didn't want to do like red flame, blue feather, you know, I don't know, green tongue. Then your eyes are kind of drawn everywhere and you don't really know how to focus in. I feel like it's more cohesive and just looks better if you got just a couple colors and you stick to that theme. I could be completely wrong, but that was my thought process with these colors I picked. Hence why they're all matching. Anyways, back to painting the feather. So I'm using this Achillean green here. And I'm just going to put a decently heavy unwatered down coat here on the feather and let it naturally just fall right into the cracks and crevices. There we go. And the feathers are nice and highly textured, so you don't really have to worry about pooling or anything, which is nice. And get the other side of the feathers, reload the brush a little. So one of the things that I like about the contrast paints is you can be pretty heavy-handed and just lay it on there in one fairly thick coat and let it do its thing. So I have definitely found that, you know, your smoother surface models, you have to play around with it a lot more when you do that method to try to keep it from pooling. And these guys are all smooth. I mean, there's a lot of texture, but it's also a lot of kind of smooth surfaces, and I'm like, that's one of the main reasons why I don't want to go contrast. So I felt like I would, no matter how hard I try to work it, I'd have splotches on it and it'd look messy. So that's why I wanted to try to do airbrushing. This is much more of a smoother gradient. Okay, that's a feather, nice and easy. Just one thick coat on it, let it dry. Super simple. All right, let's go ahead and do the next step to the flames. So this time we're going to use straight achromatic blue. Let's my brush off. All right, pick this dude up. And I'm going to hold it so that the ends of the flames are kind of facing downward, like gravity helped me here. Hopefully I'm holding it to where you can see this. Just kind of the tip. Here we go. Remember, I'm not painting all the way to where it meets the staff. I'm leaving that bit of a white there. Flip it over to the other side, do the same thing. There we go, just like that. It's already kind of coming together a little bit. I'm gonna hold it like this for a few minutes, not a few minutes, maybe a minute. Let it start drying some, because if you pick it up like this, it's gonna start dripping down into the white areas. So I'm just gonna have to hold it. Oh, I almost forgot the little flame on the tail. Just halfway. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. There we go. All right, and there's one more step after this for the flame, which I think you can technically do it while it's still wet, but I think it works a little bit better if you go ahead and try to let it mostly dry, if not dry completely, before you do the next step. So I'll just hold it here for a few minutes, let it dry a bit, so that way I don't have to worry about it running down into the white areas when I set it standing. I think it's coming together, looks starting to come together pretty well. I'm liking the staff, even though it's still needing more coats and everything. I think it looks cool. So let's give this a few minutes and then we'll get back to it. So I have applied a second coat to all the metallic areas so it pops a little bit better. This is mostly dried now, but I just realized that I forgot to paint something, the tongue. So let's go and do that real quick before we continue on with the other stuff. So I'm just using this model color purple. I'm going to paint the tongue all over with it. Again, just being careful when painting not to get it on the areas that are already painted. So try not to get it on the beak here. Just do one quick coat. I mean, it's very similar to the color that the tongue already is. So it's not a whole lot different. Just slightly more purpley. I'm gonna get it in there without getting on the tooth or the beak. And it's just one coat, and you don't have to be super, you know, conscious of whether you're getting a full coverage or not, because again, it blends so closely in with the base pink that it's not that big of a deal. All right, now with it still wet on there, I'm gonna get a little bit of this Slanesh gray here. I'm not even rinsing my brush off. A little bit of this Slanesh gray on the tip of my brush here. And I'm gonna run it over top of the tongue, back and forth intentionally so that it mixes in with the still wet purple that we just put on there. Get a little bit more of the Slanesh. Do the same thing, apply it to the top, and just kind of mix it on in there. It's basically like a bit of a wet blending. Blending the colors together. I'm not gonna worry about doing it on the bottom of the tongue, just the top and the bits that the light naturally hits. Now at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and rinse my brush off. It's still wet. The paint on the model is still wet, and get some more of this Slanesh gray. And I'm gonna hit the areas that are directly kind of being seen or highlighted by the light. I don't know if I'm holding it at an angle to where y'all can see, probably not. But I'm essentially just kind of doing a brighter edge highlight here. All right, like that. I'm just blending it to the top of the tongue again. Okay. So it's just a lighter, paler purple. Once it dries, you can even go back in with just the Slanesh gray and just do a very faint line edge highlight along the edge of the tongue, top edge of the tongue if you want. But that's all I do with the tongue, super easy. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and pull this guy back out, our horns guy. I think he's like the leader of the horrors. And I'm going to get good old Agrax Earthshade here. Check it up. And I'm just going to liberally coat these horns. They're ridged. I want it to catch the ridges. And yep, just like that. Flip it around to the other side. And the back side is more smooth, so you gotta be a little bit more careful with your applications. That way you don't have it pulling unless you just want it to pull and have kind of that more messy look. And I am letting the Agrax Earthshade spill over the pink skin. That way it helps blend the two together a little bit. So it's less of a stark transition. Okay. And if you find it's not really, for some reason, it's not filling in, you don't have paint in a groove or something, just kind of poke at it, jab at it, and paint will naturally come off your brush and fall into that groove. Okay, and you can really just leave it like this. It looks really good, but I think once it dries, I'm gonna go in and try to do a bit of a, like either have the base, I'm trying to keep it from pulling, either have the base darker and the tips lighter, or have the tips darker. I haven't quite decided yet, but we'll let it dry and think on it. Could just leave it like this, but I do think I might want to do a little bit of a gradient on them. Okay, so there's that. Since we have the Agrax Earth Shade out, let's go ahead and shade this guy here. We're going to shade his beak pretty heavily because I want it to, but I'm going to kind of pull it where I have the extra amount and it's collecting. I'm going to kind of pull it towards the tip. That way the tip is naturally, and then the bottom of it, of the beak here, I actually want it to pull a little bit so it's naturally darker. And I'm making sure that it settles into that crack that's kind of carved in there, that filigree. Okay. I am going to start coloring the nails, claws with the Agrax Earthshade, and I'm going to deliberately be kind of messy and get the Agrax Earthshade onto the skin or the pole, just so it helps naturally shade it. Give it some shadows and blend those color transitions together a little bit better. All the little nails. All right, now that we've done that, while that's drying, let's go ahead and pop out the Achillean green again. And this is for the flames. Set them down. All right, so what I'm gonna do with the Achillean green is just apply it to the tips, just the kind of outside line of the flames, as they are going to be the coolest, so they're the darkest color. And I'm going to kind of dab it a little bit further in. It kind of speckles at some of the raised areas to help kind of break it up a little bit. It's like that. So you can see it all. Make sure to get inside, get this little bit here. Line there. All right, and flip it over, do the other side. Now as it's drying, I'm going to get some more of my brush and go in and just again put another little dab at the very tips of some of these. You could even like take it another notch up and get some black out, some black paint, and dab a couple areas with it. Okay, there's my flame. Not too bad, you don't think? All right, let's see what's next. Let me pull the Aethermatic Blue out again. Gotta do the eyes. Put my brush off here. Oh, let me mix it. I'm Just get a little bit on the tip of the brush and just dab at the eye that we had previously painted white. And get a little more. It gives a nice little glow effect. I mean, you don't want to just drown it in the achromatic blue because then you won't have the white shining through. And you want a little bit of that white shining through to get that glow effect. Okay, so next, the metallic areas should be mostly dry. So I'm going to take Reclin Flush Shade here, and we are going to just drown, well, maybe not necessarily drown, but pretty close to it, all of the metallic areas. I'm going to get a good amount on my brush here and just start going to town. I like the Reclin Flush Shade because it kind of makes it more of a reddish orangey brighter metallic, like going over the, or gold. I find that when you use, compared to when you use Agrax Earthshade, which kind of dulls it out and it makes it look darker, obviously more brown, makes it a little more dull. So I like using, at least for these guys, because I want it to be more shiny and new and just bright. Better maintained, not dirty. The Reclin Flush Shade, I think, fits these people better. I'm gonna make sure that it's heavier in the recesses here. And then I'm gonna, when I do these little rings around where the shaft is, the blue shaft, if you put in a heavy amount and let it bleed onto the blue, it helps cover up that kind of transition of the metallic against the blue, especially if you got a little bit of it onto the blue part. It just helps smooth it out. It's good. And I'm gonna just go over and get his little pieces, get the sword. I don't know why I'm actually painting the blade because I'm going to be going over the blade with silver, but whatever. Again, I'm being messy with this around the skin. There are areas where the metallic just kind of looks like a harsh cut or bled onto the skin a little bit, and this cleans it up. Or at least hides it a little bit. Okay, I think that's all the metallic bits on him. All right, let me shade up this little thing real quick. We just gotta let that all dry. And see if there's anything else. I guess I can go back to this guy here. Let's see. All right. Let's my brush off. Okay. So what do I want to do with these horns? I'm going to use wildwood here. And I am going to, do I want it darker on the tips like this guy or at the bases? Maybe the base, we'll try the base, we'll go opposite. All right, so I'm going to get a very small amount of this contrast wildwood here. Very small amount to my brush. And just kind of dab it on down here at the base. Now I'm gonna go rinse brush off real quick while it's still wet. Get some of this contrast medium. I'm gonna use it to kind of feather up the wildwood. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. I know it's kind of far away. I think it's already dried there, so let me get a little more. And just dab it around, rinse off real quick, get some medium, and feather it up if I can. It's resisting me out here on the back. Just might need to go a little higher, just fine. Just playing with it until I get it where I want it to. Alright, rinse brush off, go with the median again. I really hope y'all can see what I'm doing. And I'm really just playing with it, making it up as I go. There may be a better, easier way to do this. But I kind of like what I'm seeing so far. A little more of the wildwood. Rinse off my brush. And then just kind of feather it. You know what? Help if I hold it like this. Like so. Kind of like it. Keep holding it like this. All right, I'm gonna do it to the other side. Put some wildwood on the base of this other one. Like so. Rinse, medium, and feather. More wildwood, dab on there, rinse it off, and medium and feather. I say feather. I'm just kind of pulling the paint downward little by little, so that way it's dark where I initially applied it and it gets a little lighter and more spread out as I go further down. Pigmentation gets diluted down and it causes that kind of smooth transition gradient, somewhat smooth anyways. And it's not just like a full brushing downward, because then you're just gonna kind of pull and smear, and it's just doesn't really work, at least not for me. So what I do is I kind of do a mixture of dabbing at it, just picking at it. I think it looks good. Okay, there we go. There's his horns. A little bit of a transition, darker to light. I think it turned out decent enough anyways. Oh, it's a little splotchy here. Let's see if I can fix it on the back side. It's easier to do when you got that texture, but on these smoother ends, at least for me, it's a little more hard to get it to where it's not splotchy. Okay, I like it. This guy, I believe, is done. There's him. He'll join the others. These 3 left to do. Let's go ahead and finish out the feather so that way this guy can be done. Cap these real quick. Nothing is worse. I always thought that spilling a pot of Nuln oil was the worst thing in the world. I think it's now the worst thing in the world is to, in the world of painting that is to spill a pot of contrast paints, because these things are $8 a pop. Yeah. So it's pretty sad when you dump them. Okay, so Mr. Feather Guy, I'm just gonna grab this moot green here. Get a little bit of it out. And just a tiny little bit on the tip of my brush here. And I'm just, I don't know, just going to draw along this little center part of the feather. The stem, I guess, is that what it's called? Like that. Again, I'm not sure if I like going with the green, but I'm just gonna roll with it. I contemplated doing it in pink, but I'm like, there's already so much pink here. Contemplated yellow, purple, but decided I wanted to go with the green. Kind of tropical. And I'm a huge fan of moot green. One of the things I like about Skaven is you can go all out on these bright poppy greens. They're warpstone. Okay, so that's a feather. That's it. This guy's done. Okay, so after painting the feather, I decided to go back and touch on the metallics again. I thought I'd hit record, but evidently I didn't, so didn't get that footage of me painting them. But essentially after they were, you know, shaded in the Reikland Flesh shade and dried, I went over and highlighted them in the gold. And then I went and highlighted again and touched specific areas in the silver. I don't know if you can see it, how it's positioned, but just like along the raised areas and where it looks like a little gem is. I picked out the little metal bits in the flame and painted the sword and whatnot. And basically this is where we're at here, okay? It's not, doesn't look quite how I want it to look. I was hoping it'd look better. It's just experimenting. It's a little messy to me, clunky. It's not bad. You could definitely just leave it right here as is. But I think I want to take a little further and experiment a little bit more, and we'll see how it turns out. Now, one of my favorite things to do with silver metallic paints is to glaze over it or shade over it, however you want to say it, with either the Griff Charger gray contrast or the Space Wolves gray contrast. I think it looks really good when you do that. For this go around, I think I'm gonna go with the Griff Charger gray. It's a little bit less blue, a little more gray, but it's lighter. So I'm gonna use it on this sword here. I'm just gonna paint over the sword. It's still definitely a bit of a bluish color, but I really like it as a glaze over the sword. And I'm actually hitting these silver bits a little bit too. I'm gonna go with a heavier application on this lower portion of the sword just to help with the natural shading. Of the silver. I'm trying to get in this little tab at the cracks there, or at least where it, there. All right. I'll flip it to pick up the other side here. Do the same on the other side of the sword. I'm actually going to go ahead and go over the other bits of silver that I painted on the sword. Okay. Wick off the paint a little bit on my brush and wick away some of this on the raised portion here of the blade. Just like the other side, I want the underside of the blade to be shaded darker, if possible. All right. Like that. I think it does a pretty cool effect. Now I like it, so I think I'm actually going to go back over all of the silver bits here that I painted and just try to do controlled. I'm only doing it over the silver. I'm okay if it spills off and naturally shades around the silver onto the gold because it helps with the shadowing. I think I like that more. And I'm going to leave these little raised, what looks like an eye or a gemstone part unpainted because I'm going to go over that with the Aethermatic blue. Try to see if I can get it to glow a little bit. I think I like it, at least more than I did. There's that. That's what it looks like. I do have one last little highlighting I need to do on the beak, but otherwise I think he might be done. And push him aside and take a look at this guy real quick. Again, I just highlighted after shading with the Reikland Flush shade. I went and highlighted with the gold, and then I did some little spot highlighting, almost like a dry brush kind of, with the silver. Now I'm going to take this and just run it over the face a little bit. Not a little bit, a lot, I guess. Okay, just tinted in, looks kind of cool. Roll with it. Get the inside of this textured, looks like scales almost area. Like so. I'll flip it around, do the other side. Put him down real quick. Get the Aethermatic blue out. Rinse off the brush. And apply it to this eyepiece here. Pretty heavily. I want it to soak deep into the cracks there. There we go. You down, pick you up, and do the same. Now there is a lot of becoming a lot of blue here. There's a chance that I should have just gone with like a pink or an entirely different color to paint these little gems and cause this glow, but it's all good. Okay, maybe a little bit more. Yeah, there you go. Again, applying it to the bottom of the blade where I'd already put the Griff Charger Gray, just to give a little bit of a blue, otherworldly look to it. And there we go. That's that. All that's left to do is a quick little, I'm just taking a look at him, a quick little edge highlighting of the beak, and then I think we're done with the models themselves. It's just doing their bases. A little bit of this, go back to the filthy brown orange here. Yellow, I don't know what color to call it. I think it's more of yellow, yellowy orange. Sunflower, maybe. Okay. Just get a little bit on the brush. I'm just gonna do a little bit of an edge highlight here along the top of the beak. Like so. And then along the edge where it meets the face. Just trying to be careful not to get it on the face. Sorry, I'm probably holding this off camera. There we go. So just to the top and then in front along the edge of the face here. And that should be good enough. Let's go ahead and do a little more on my brush. And I'll do just a little along the top edge of the bottom beak as well. The tip. I'm going down a little bit like that. Okay. And there's our beak. And I think that's it. I think we're done with our dudes, aside from the bases. Okay, and here they are, all 10 of them painted up. I think they look pretty good. I'm happy with how they turned out. You can certainly do these with fewer steps and details and still have them look really good, especially if you just use contrast paints. Or you can go even further than I took it. But overall, I'm happy with where they're at. And the only thing left to do are their bases. I think I'm gonna go with the lava earth look, except do, instead of the lava colors, go with like hot, bright blue and purple, maybe pink, you know, the colors of Zinch. And then put this, you know, use Modern Earth as the crackle stuff that goes over it. But that's what I'll be doing next on these guys, and I think that will help them pop when they have that black base underneath them. Okay, and then there's the list of paints I used lined up behind them. And here is the finished product from the Demons of Zinch Start Collecting, the Pink Horrors. And I put them on the crackle base, which hasn't actually technically completely finished drying yet. I think it's like a good 24 hours or so if you don't use like a hairdryer or anything like that to dry it up. before it's completely done setting with the cracking. But I think it turned out pretty good. Maybe should have gone with a thicker layer, but overall, I think it looks pretty good. Pretty happy with the results. Hope that y'all found this helpful. And again, if you have any tips for improving what I did here, please let me know in the comments. There you have it. Thanks, guys.